So this might be a series I try to do on the reg. I'm calling it Story Time with Bowser, but I would like suggestions for a better title because that's not a good title. And it's very bland and normal. So what these videos are going to be are me telling stories about my industry experience, especially since the creation and release of the Onyx film. So once you get through this episode, maybe then you could suggest what I should title these moving forward. So the topic for today's video is my experience pitching a Boglins movie to Mattel.
Hey, the name's Boglins, each sold separately, and we're looking for good homes. Maybe yours?
So for those of you that don't know, when you get a film out there and, especially, I'm getting a text, especially if it premieres at a big fest like Sundance, or if it just makes headlines for what it did on the indie box office circuit, you'll oftentimes get reps, or if you already have reps, your reps will kind of utilize that momentum or that heat to get you meetings all over town. And these meetings are called generals. I'm sorry the text alert keeps going off, but I'd rather just keep going and not restart. So you get these meetings called generals. And a lot of people roll their eyes at generals. A lot of, they call it the water bottle tour. They can kind of go nowhere and be ultimately for nothing, but I like them because I'm the kind of filmmaker that can shape their ideas, I think, into a lot of others' visions. It hasn't happened yet, but if you ask me to pitch a movie based on a toy, I can do it. I can come up with the idea, and I can get excited about it. I'm not the person that's like, Mattel, Boglins, dude, fuck off, dude. That's not my vision. Where's my DNA? I have my films for that, Onyx and other projects, but I like the idea of making something for someone else. Maybe that's just the kind of straight A student in me, the achiever in me, or maybe it's because of my years at Nerdist making branded content for clients and companies, and I enjoyed it. In a way, it's easier to approach it objectively because there's a very clear target you have to hit. And there's check boxes, and sometimes that's satisfying. Sometimes the amorphous landscape of do your thing or do whatever you want can be a little overwhelming or exhausting. So there's a container to doing branded work. So one of the generals that I had after Onyx was released was, through my reps, was with Mattel. And at first they were talking about a Magic 8-Ball film, and a Jack in the Box horror film, a horror film based on the toy Jack in the Box. And I was like, yeah, I'll pitch on both of those. I'll come up with something that I'm in love with. All these movies behind me, these VHS tapes, well, you can't see them because there's ghouls in the way. But any one of those could have been just based on an existing property. I don't feel like the idea has to be shit just because maybe the agenda behind the creation of the piece is to sustain an IP or to sell toys. I mean, I'm an 80s kid, okay? I grew up wanting the toys that were based on the properties that I loved, and I don't think there's anything inherently shitty about that. I think it can be shitty, and I think it can lead to a swath of unoriginality, but I don't think it has to, if the right minds are behind it. So anyway, in that meeting, I said, yeah, Magic 8-Ball, yeah, for sure, Jack in the Box, no doubt. But the person I was meeting with said, but actually, after watching Onyx, there's something I would rather have your take on. Do you remember the toys Boglins? I don't know that this person realized that behind me on my shelf in the Zoom call was a Boglin, okay? And even tinier than that, baby Boglin, finger puppets. So do I remember Boglins? Yeah, because I still have them, and I love them. I know the history of them. They were created by a Jim Henson puppeteer. And he actually pitched to Jim doing them as a toy line, and Jim said, no, but you should, pursue that elsewhere. So I don't know, again, maybe I'm explaining things that people already understand, but I'll just tell you what the process is like. So basically, you say in that meeting, I'd love to pitch on Boglins, and they say, cool, come back with a vague idea in a couple weeks. Nothing super fleshed out, nothing super written down. Could just be another verbal, explanation or pitch. So, get into a meeting a couple weeks later. I've mapped out what excites me about this world, turning it into kind of an Amblin style E.T. or Gremlins or The Gate or Monster Squad throwback feeling film, but taking place in the modern day and having a modern message about the environment and even climate change and science deniers and all sorts of things. So I pitch that generally, and they say, okay, yeah, we like this direction. Maybe change this, maybe tweak that, but come back to us with a full, fleshed out pitch deck. So I take another couple of weeks, and you work on that pitch deck. And you talk about tone, you talk about style, you talk about approach. You say, I'm going to do, when you look at people's pitch decks, sometimes it's the most obvious things. I mean, they're just saying, I imagine a film with practical monsters and a really fun Stranger Things type of vibe. And you're like, yeah, fucking who, of course. But that's what people need to hear. They just need to hear it explained very broadly, very plainly, and it's often unexciting. And to me, oftentimes feels like, do I need to explain this? Like, you guys get what I'm saying, right? Everything has to be explained. You've got to put every single descriptor you can. You have to say it's this meets that. You have to say this scene will feel like this scene from this movie. You're pitching to people that might not have the ability to visualize and imagine as greatly as you can, the creator, the writer, the filmmaker. So you load up that deck with as many visual references. I actually had Creature Kid create a design for what maybe the big bad would look like, because in my pitch, the Boglins were not the villains. They were a nuisance at first, but then it's quickly revealed there's a larger villain, and it would be this big bad Boglin that then the Boglins and the townspeople have to band together to fight. But also, the kind of inciting incident for the film was that a baby Boglin snuck home in the pocket of a little girl who was actually bullied and thrown into the bog because she's known as being this science nerd that is, a stick in the mud. So the cool kids at school bullied her, threw her into the bog, and this little guy winds up being her pet. And of course, he grows into a mature Boglin. So not only did I have concept art, tone references, visual references, an entire story, beat it out. You take every scene and say, this happens, then this, then this, then this. And you try to get it down to something that could be expressed verbally in, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Your whole pitch might be 30 minutes, but the story part is maybe 10, 15 minutes, and you want it to be light on its feet. You don't want to get down too deep into the weeds, but you need to have explained the entire story front to back so that they know you have it all mapped out somewhat in broad strokes in your head. So not only was I stoked to have the concept art from Creature Kid, I partnered with my VFX artist Tyler Adams to create a visual effect that would show how we would attack the smaller creatures. Because the smaller creatures would most likely be VFX, even though the larger creatures would be practical. I wanted to, it's really hard to fit animatronics and wiring into something this tiny. Obviously, you can do what they did on Gremlins, where they build giant-sized versions of Gizmo's head so that they can get close-ups where he's more expressive than in the smaller puppet. But even still, I knew we'd need to bridge the gap with a visual effect. So this is what Tyler and my sound designer, Mike Gallagher, put together as part of my pitch to Mattel. Super cool. You got the vibe. I think that's music from Poltergeist. Super cute. That's our baby Yoda, et cetera, et cetera. They loved the test. I think they even kind of shared it to the rest of the office. So that went over well. The whole pitch went over well. I left the pitch with a couple of notes from the Mattel people. We would like this if it were a little more towards the burbs, a little more about the townspeople, and less about just the little girl and her friends and the Boglins. So I said, hell yeah, burbs, come on. Yeah, let me juice it up with more burbsy stuff. Shortly after my pitch, I was at a mixer for filmmakers that were alumni of South by Southwest, which actually could be another story time. Film festivals, programmers, mixers, shaking hands, how far that gets you, how far it doesn't get you. That could be a good topic. Actually, let me know if you'd like to hear something in my next video, like an insider, kind of inside baseball, indie film / someone trying to break into more mainstream film industry stories. So at this mixer, I met 5 other filmmakers that had all been to Mattel in the last 6 weeks to pitch. Some on Boglins, some on Magic 8 Ball, some on Jack in the Box. So it was funny to kind of compare notes. And one of the things that I thought was interesting was, out of the group of people I talked with, I was one of the only people that took it very seriously. I remember one filmmaker was like, yeah, I pitched on Boglins. You know what my pitch was? The movie opens with a Mattel employee literally scraping the bottom of a barrel and finding a Boglin. And that's like our inciting incident. And I was like, okay, well, sure, that's one kind of ironically detached way to approach it. I think I'm a little more earnest than that. But this filmmaker was like, what was your pitch? And I said, oh, my pitch was a really kick-ass Boglins movie that would like fucking rule and would have been like a great adventure film that I would have grown up on, wanting to see in theaters 10 times in a row. And they were like, oh, huh, yeah. I don't know. I'm not, I don't engage with, I'm a pragmatist. As much as I'm a dreamer, I'm still quite a realist when it comes to what's possible to get done out here, what's possible to get made. And I want to play ball. I mean, I do. I want to play ball. I'm not the guy that's going to walk in and be like, here's your Boglins pitch. It's trash, you dumb fucks. Make something original. I'm going to be the guy that's like, we could make a really original Boglins movie that would fucking rip. I did not get the job. I did not get the job. They actually kind of told me to stop worrying about it before I even kind of came back with the Burbs fixes, the revised pitch. They found someone else and moved on. So I think I tell these stories to, I guess, enlighten people into understanding how much invisible work there is. And anybody out here knows that. There's so much invisible labor done behind the scenes that you'll never read about. You're never going to read an article. Even if you read an article whenever they announce the Boglins movie and they say who's doing it, they're never going to say, and these 15 other filmmakers spent month and a half, drafting a pitch, writing, and our names shouldn't be in that article. I'm not saying they should be, but I'm just saying there's a lot of work that goes on out here that nobody ever hears about or sees. And I think that stuff's interesting. And every once in a while, a couple of years will pass and you'll hear a filmmaker tell a story on a podcast, or or we all now know about famous filmmakers that were close to making this and it didn't happen, or close to making that and it didn't happen. Rob Zombie's dream project of making the Groucho Marx biopic, Joe Dante's dream project of making the Looney Tunes, the historical film about the birth of Looney Tunes called Termite Terrace. Yeah, so I think it's kind of going to be fun to share some of those stories. I might not be as storied or as influential as Joe Dante or Rob Zombie, but I think some of my experience might still be of value to an audience that's curious. So that's my Boglins story. Let me know if you have an idea of what I should call these storytime videos. And then also let me know what I should cover next. And again, my Kickstarter's live for the Onyx music video. The link's in the description. Thanks for your support and your time.